In the Gospel of Luke, Jesus says, "I have come to set the world on fire, and oh, how I wish it were already blazing." The fire that Jesus seeks to ignite in the world is the fire of love, charity, in the hearts and minds of the human race who has grown cold because of sin. We see this fire of love, the love of God in Jesus Christ, especially in the Sacred Heart of Jesus, in the logo that we use in our parish. The heart of Jesus crowned with thorns, but also adorned with the fire of love with which his heart burns. I'm Father Andrew Dickinson, the pastor of Sacred Heart in Aberdeen, and as your pastor, which means shepherd, it comes from the word for shepherd, I want to shepherd you, the people of God, to continue to develop that love of God and love of neighbor in your hearts, and make sure that you're protected from ideas that might corrupt or quench the love of God and love of neighbor. As your shepherd, and following the Good Shepherd, our Lord Jesus Christ, again, we want to lead you to the food that you should eat and guard you from the food that you should not eat. So this video is some commentary about some ideas in the political world, the polis, the city in which we live and the world in which we live. This is not a partisan video, though. The ideas that I'm going to talk about, this idea that could quench the love of God, this idea which would not be good for you as the flock of our Lord Jesus Christ, is not a partisan issue. It's something that affects both Republicans and Democrats and is gaining momentum in the world in which we live in. So I want to lead you away from these pastures and encourage you to guard others and guide others in your Christian life to make sure that the political movements that you are involved in, the ways that you seek to build up the earthly city, would be protected from this idea, this bad food, which can quench love in our hearts. So as I said, this issue impacts not just one political party, but both Democrats and Republicans. It's an issue that we need to be on guard against in the years and days following the November 3rd election of 2020. This is not just a momentary issue, but something that's going to have a lasting impact into the future. So we need to be aware of this. The issue is critical theories or being woke. Critical theories, from the idea of an academic discipline, is the critical engagement of social structures to look for problematic or oppressive areas. It sounds pretty benign in that way. It sounds pretty good, right? Shouldn't we critically engage things to make sure that there's no areas of oppression? Social media calls this phenomenon becoming woke or awakened, very much a religious overtones. Thinking in the United States, your history books might have taught you of the Great Awakening and other subsequent religious awakenings in these United States. And so to become woke in this regard is to become aware of needing to critically engage various social structures to root out that oppression. Again, it sounds benign, but there's a problem. Critical theory is actually not benign. It's actually a poison to charity, which will cripple our ability to love God and love our neighbor, to love with that Sacred Heart of Jesus. Critical theory, in its essence, actually becomes not just a reasonable look at things, but actually it's a relativistic, it's applied relativism. My insight for this critique of critical theories comes from some liberal progressive authors by the name of James Lindsay and Helen Pluckrose, who themselves are concerned. They probably would disagree with many teachings of the Catholic Church, but I agree with them that we should be rightly concerned about this critical theory and its spread in American public life. They wrote a book about it by the name of Cynical Theories. See what they did there, switching the word critical for cynical. Their book, Cynical Theories, is a unpacking of how critical theories have developed, and then looking at how this will actually lead us to not have as inclusive of a society, as healthy as a society as we might hope to have. James Lindsay and Helen Pluckrose say that by applying critical theories and the intellectual relativism that underpins them, those of goodwill, hoping to become awakened to social oppression, will actually enable future social oppressions of various aspects. And so this is good for us to be aware of. Now, don't just take James Lindsay and Helen Pluckrose's word for it. You can look to our own popes. Pope John Paul II was concerned about moral relativism in his encyclical letter Veritatis Splendor. Pope Benedict XVI, on the night before he was elected Pope back in, was that 2005? Not the night before he was elected, but before they went to the conclave, he gave a homily to the cardinals concerned about the dictatorship of relativism. And Pope Francis in Laudato Si, number 123, talks about the dangers of applied relativism and that we need to be aware of the fact that this applied relativism, this cultural relativism, is not just an issue of impacting social life, it actually impacts the way that we engage the environmental world around us. So we need to be concerned with these critical theories. How do these critical theories work? Again, these critical theories seem attractive because they appear to lift up the voiceless or the powerless, but the danger is that they reject anything that isn't from those powerless communities. It really comes very much a have and a have-not dynamic. Either you have and therefore we shouldn't listen to you, or you have not and therefore your voice should be multiplied. And so as part of critical theories, they actually even, I know some people will say that critical theorists are engaged in Marxism or socialism. It's interesting, critical theorists actually even reject socialism and Marxism. Why? Because socialism comes from Karl Marx, who was a white heterosexual male. As a white heterosexual male, he's part of the dominant social structure, which has set the tone for hundreds, thousands of years, and so therefore that sort of worldview and vision should be rejected. You might hear this in critical race theory, which would say that even the U.S. Constitution is what they would say systematically racist, not because it explicitly oppresses someone of a non-European race, but simply because it came from people of European descent. Just because it comes from people of European descent, a critical theorist would say it's to be rejected out of hand as being part of a system of racism in that regard. Now, so another one of the faults of critical theories, or one of the ways that maybe it's easy to think that being woke is the way to go, is that it seems attractive to apply critiques. But for example, the U.S. Constitution is a self-critiquing document with areas of amendment, areas that you could make explicit changes in laws. It's not something that's a strict, rigid thing written in stone. You have to understand things in a certain way. Yes, of course, there's original intention, but it is a thing that can be modified in a set way. But critical theories, again, rejects it out of hand, just as critical theories rejects Christianity. Because, again, a predominance of Christian experience, Christian teaching, Christian development has come from what they would say would be a white, heterosexual, Eurocentric experience, therefore to be rejected out of hand and to find alternate voices to be lifted up. So what's the further problem with this? Again, it's not the idea of critiquing things. Critiquing things is fine. But the issue is the outright rejection of anything just simply based on where that voice comes from. But secondly is the demonization of those you don't agree with. And it's this demonization that really cripples that love of God that Jesus came to set ablaze in our hearts. And so for you as a Christian to embrace this critical theory, to think that being woke is the right answer, to embrace this critical theory, then we actually suppress or quench love in our hearts. Because Jesus tells us we should love our enemies. And on the cross, our Lord said, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." And so if we just simply look at our enemies, look at those who are different from us, and say, the heck with them, we're not loving them. We're not caring for them. And that'd be the greatest difficulty. Not the rejection of the U.S. Constitution. Constitutions come and go. There's Christian love in the hearts of men and women for millennia before there was a U.S. Constitution. But to demonize your opponent, this is a poison in our society. It is a poison whether you're a Democrat or Republican, whether you're apathetic politically, whatever we are, but part of our common society, the city on earth, okay? If charity, love for our neighbor, love for our enemy is not an animating principle, we're doomed to be perpetually divided. As I began the Gospel of Luke Jesus tells us that I have come to set the earth on fire, and oh, how I wish it was already blazing. We know that fire is love of God and love of neighbor. Jesus in the Gospel of Matthew chapter 22 says that the greatest commandment is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. And the second is like it, to love your neighbor as yourself. Be on guard against critical theories. Okay? Be on guard against becoming woke. Because the danger is it seems like it's a love for the oppressed, but actually it's a bitter pill in that way. It's actually hatred for your enemy, coated in the appearance of kindness for those who are hurt in some regard. But in the end, it will lead our hearts not to love, not to the fire that Jesus desires for to blaze within us, but rather to a cold heart, and a heart that is not open to love of God or love of neighbor. I'm Father Andrew Dickinson, the pastor at Sacred Heart in Aberdeen. I love you. I pray for you. God bless you.